The idea of a Gaza defense plan has surfaced repeatedly over the years, often wrapped in speculation, fragmented reports, and sometimes deliberate disinformation. To properly evaluate whether such a plan is fact or fiction, we need to examine it in the same way one might approach a new piece of military technology, a high-level strategic project, or even a speculative defense system. In this review, we will break down what is claimed, what could theoretically exist, how it might perform in reality, and what unique design elements or selling points would make it stand out, while also questioning whether it actually exists as described, or whether it remains a speculative narrative. The goal is to balance hard technical discussion with accessible explanations, so that anyone can follow along without needing a background in military studies. When people talk about a Gaza defense plan, they usually imagine a comprehensive, multi-layered approach to protecting or controlling Gaza's borders, infrastructure, and population centers. Depending on who is describing it, the plan can look either like an ambitious, cutting-edge security strategy or like a convenient myth designed to influence political debates. At the heart of the speculation are questions of scale, resources, feasibility, and motivation. Some suggest it involves advanced surveillance technologies, underground barriers, missile defense layers, and even cyber elements. Others argue that no such unified plan exists, and that what we see are fragments of ad hoc policies and individual military projects stitched together under a dramatic label. The claimed features often sound like something out of a modern defense catalog. One of the most commonly mentioned aspects is border fortification. Reports often suggest there are underground barriers reinforced with sensors that can detect tunneling activity. On a technical level, this would require seismic sensors, ground-penetrating radar, and perhaps AI-driven monitoring stations to filter noise from real threats. To a layperson, this means if someone were digging a tunnel beneath the ground, the system would be smart enough to know the difference between harmless activity, like shifting soil due to weather, and the intentional digging of a passageway. If this is true, it would represent a major advancement in anti-tunnel warfare, which has historically been one of the most difficult challenges in the region. Another often cited element is aerial defense. People talk about an extension of missile interception technology similar to Iron Dome or other layered systems. Technically speaking, missile defense relies on fast radar tracking and interceptor rockets that destroy incoming threats mid-air. The supposed Gaza defense plan would not just rely on one layer but several, from short-range interceptors to longer-range ones, creating a dome-like shield over the territory. For everyday viewers, think of it like a security system for a house but scaled up massively, where instead of just locking your door, you have motion sensors, cameras, and even automated barriers. Each one might catch what the other misses, and together they build resilience. A third component that often comes up in discussion is surveillance. Advocates of the theory argue that drones, satellites, and AI-powered monitoring systems could be stitched together to create near-constant oversight. In design terms, this would be a fusion of persistent aerial surveillance with ground-based intelligence gathering. Imagine a network where every street, every potential entry point, and even online activity is monitored in real time, feeding into a central command center. For a non-technical audience, this could be compared to traffic cameras in a smart city that monitor cars to improve flow. Except here the stakes are not about traffic jams, but about preventing potential infiltrations or attacks. Then there is the issue of urban defense. If such a plan existed, it would likely consider how to manage the densely populated environment of Gaza. The design would need to balance between heavy fortifications and mobility. Urban defense strategies might involve rapid deployment forces, fortified checkpoints, and even automated systems like remote-controlled sentry guns. These features, while sounding futuristic, already exist in prototype form in several countries. For a layman, picture this as a blend between a heavily guarded airport security checkpoint and a high-tech military base embedded inside a city. The design challenge here is how to integrate these elements without paralyzing civilian life. Performance aspects are trickier to measure because so much of what is claimed remains unverified. If we treat the Gaza defense plan as real, then the performance would hinge on coordination. It's one thing to have radar, barriers, and drones, but another to have them function seamlessly as one ecosystem. Military analysts often stress that the weak point of any complex defense system is not usually the technology itself, but the coordination between human operators, machines, and intelligence sharing. To give a relatable analogy, imagine having the best phone, laptop, and smart speaker, but if they don't sync together properly, you don't really have a smart home. You just have expensive gadgets sitting separately. Performance in this case would mean the difference between a defense system that truly minimizes threats and one that looks impressive on paper but fails under pressure. The unique selling point of the Gaza defense plan, if it exists, would be its comprehensiveness. Defense projects usually focus on one domain, like air defense or cyber defense. The appeal here is that this supposed plan ties together underground, aerial, digital, and urban strategies into one unified package. That's unusual in military design because complexity usually increases risk. If it were real, the selling point would be its ambition to be the first truly holistic defense environment created in one of the most volatile regions on Earth. For lay people, this can be understood as a one-stop security solution. Something that doesn't just lock your front door but also monitors your windows, secures your Wi-Fi, and calls the police automatically if anything unusual happens, however. Critics argue that the very comprehensiveness makes it unlikely to exist in the way some describe. The resources needed, the political will, and the technological integration would be immense. For instance, just maintaining an anti-tunnel barrier across the entire region would cost billions and require constant monitoring. Missile defense systems are notorious for their high price tags, sometimes costing far more to intercept a single rocket than the rocket itself costs to launch. Surveillance on the scale imagined would create legal and ethical issues, not to mention technical challenges in processing such a massive flood of data. In design terms, it would be like trying to build the perfect car that is also a plane, a submarine, and a motorcycle all in one. The more features you cram in, the less likely it is to function well in real life. When comparing what's claimed about the Gaza Defense Plan to known defense systems worldwide, we see both parallels and exaggerations. Many countries invest in layered missile defense, subterranean detection, and cyber integration. What makes the Gaza narrative stand out is how all these pieces are supposedly concentrated in a small and contested area. The density of the environment would make the plan either highly innovative or highly impractical. For a non-technical example, think about designing a skyscraper that has every luxury feature in the world's rooftop garden, private pool for every apartment, underground parking, built-in hospital. It would sound incredible, but at some point it becomes too costly and too complicated to ever build. One of the strongest arguments in favor of the Gaza Defense Plan being more fiction than fact is the lack of consistent documentation. Whenever real defense projects are unveiled, even partially, there are usually technical papers, patents, or at least consistent leaks that align. With this plan, however, most references are scattered and often contradictory. Some descriptions emphasize tunnels, others emphasize drones, some focus on urban checkpoints. This inconsistency suggests that rather than one grand unified plan, what we are seeing is a patchwork of smaller projects, each with its own scope and limitations, loosely tied together in the imagination of analysts and commentators. Still, it is worth acknowledging that even if the Gaza Defense Plan as a whole does not exist, individual components of it almost certainly do. Tunnel detection systems are real and have been deployed. Drone surveillance is widespread. Missile defense systems like Iron Dome are operational. Urban checkpoints and fortified positions are in place. What is uncertain is whether these are all part of a single overarching design, or whether they are simply tactical tools used independently. For an audience without military background, it is like hearing rumors of a new smartphone that supposedly has every possible feature: foldable screen, holograms, built-in projector, self-charging battery, only to find out later that, while some phones do have foldable screens and others have fast charging, there is no one phone that combines all those features seamlessly. The design elements attributed to this plan do reflect broader trends in modern defense thinking. The idea of multi-layered protection, sensor fusion, and integration of AI is not unique to Gaza. These are concepts explored globally, from NATO projects to East Asian defense initiatives. The unique twist here is the context applying such ambitious ideas in a highly dense, politically contested environment where every action has both military and humanitarian implications. That duality is itself a selling point in the narrative. It's not just about defending territory, but about creating a secure environment where civilian life can continue despite ongoing threats. Whether that balance is achievable is a separate question, but the fact that it is presented as a goal adds weight to the idea. Performance in a hypothetical scenario would depend on stress tester. A truly integrated Gaza defense plan would need to withstand not just one type of attack but simultaneous threats: missile barrages, cyber disruptions, tunnel infiltration, and urban unrest all at once. In testing terms, this is known as red teaming, where multiple types of simulated attacks are launched to probe weaknesses. The question is whether any system, no matter how advanced, can sustain itself under that kind of pressure. For everyday understanding, think of it like a smartphone being tested for water resistance, battery life, software security, and drop durability all at once. Usually, excelling in one area comes at the expense of another. Similarly, a defense plan might be strong against missiles but weaker against cyber threats, or effective against tunnels but slower in urban deployment. Another unique selling point often floated in discussions is the political dimension. If the Gaza Defense Plan exists, it would not just be a technical system but also a strategic message. It would signal that a permanent, stable security infrastructure is possible even in the most contested areas. That symbolic value could be as important as the functional value. In other words, even if the system is only partially effective, its mere existence might deter certain threats by projecting confidence in capability. From a design perspective, this is similar to concept cars in the automotive industry. Sometimes they are less about being practical vehicles and more about showcasing what a brand can do, setting the tone for the future. For skeptics, however, this raises the possibility that the Gaza Defense Plan is more narrative than hardware. It might be a rhetorical device, a way to frame various isolated defense projects as part of a grander vision. In that sense, the fiction serves a purpose, shaping perception and influencing political or diplomatic discussions. Just as in technology marketing, sometimes the story of innovation is more powerful than the product itself. People might believe in the existence of a cutting-edge plan not because it is real, but because the idea of it feels both possible and reassuring, or in some cases threatening. Depending on perspective, the tension between fact and fiction is what makes this topic compelling. On one hand, there are real technologies that give weight to the narrative. On the other, the absence of concrete proof suggests exaggeration. For audiences trying to make sense of it, the most practical way is to recognize that what we likely have is a mix. Certain features are fact, certain claims are inflated, and the overall packaging into something called the Gaza Defense Plan leans more toward fiction. In performance terms, the system as described would probably underdeliver if measured against the ambitious promises. But individual elements might perform well in their specific niches. The broader lesson is about how defense narratives are built. By framing existing projects as part of a larger plan, it creates the illusion of inevitability and progress. For those living in or near Gaza, the difference between fact and fiction is more than just academic. It affects how people perceive security, risk, and future stability. For outside observers, it raises questions about how much of what we hear about modern defense is based on hard engineering, and how much is shaped by political storytelling. For a technical audience, it's a case study in system integration challenges. For a lay audience, it's a reminder to always separate impressive-sounding features from what is practically achievable in the real world.